What's going on, guys? Welcome back to WWE Network and Chill, where I, Graham G. Matthews, break down all the original content I watch on the WWE Network, as well as on Vice, as today we're talking the third episode of Season 2 of Dark Side of the Ring, entitled the Brawl for All. So a lot of people were comparing this when they advertised it a couple weeks ago to be the equivalent of like what the Montreal Screwjob episode was to Season 1, and that it's very interesting. I think to a lot of non-wrestling fans, it's fascinating. And I think for the Montreal Screwjob one, they used a lot of insider, knowledge and terminology, more to the point where if you don't know a lot of wrestling lingo, you probably won't understand or appreciate the episode as much. The weird thing is that wrestling fans, from what I saw, called the Montreal Screwjob one the weakest one of Season 1, which, if it is, that's saying something, because that episode was great, too. I watched that with Alexis. She loved it as much as I did. This is another one where this one she knew nothing about at all. We knew a little bit about the Montreal Screwjob, which is why she was interested in it. She knew nothing about the Brawl for All. It's a concept, it's a tournament we wrestling fans know all about from 20 years ago. A lot of non-wrestling fans probably don't, because it's been dead and buried, never been brought up again. It's a very, I can't even say it's a controversial topic, because we all know how dumb it was. Like, it's not one of those things like, oh, was it dumb, was it great? No, I think a lot of people will agree. It was an incredibly stupid concept. And it was far more damaging to the company in the long run than anything they accomplished or achieved in the short term, which, even in retrospect, was probably nothing. No new stars were created. Careers were ended. Pushes were cut short. The whole thing was an entire disaster. This is a totally different episode than the Benoit one or the New Jack one, because no one's getting killed. It's more about a dumb wrestling thing than it is like, oh, this person's life, or like the crimes they committed and stuff like that. It's totally different than the other two episodes, which is why I think it was perfectly placed here in Season 3. A bit of a disclaimer, though, I am recording this outside, so like the outside noises are still prevalent. But nonetheless, to get started here, they kick off the episode, obviously with Chris Jericho still narrating, who mentions how WWF and WCW were competing at the time in a ratings war during the Monday Night War. We all know this. Vince Russo is all over this episode because he was the one who's credited. He actually admits he was the one who came up with the idea for the tournament. I did not know that. This is probably common knowledge by now. I did not know that, though I am not surprised at all. So he says, and Jim Cornette, of course, if you have Vince Russo on, you have to have Jim Cornette on as well. And he was working with the company, so it makes sense. Again, this is the exact equivalent of that Montreal Screwjob episode, because that episode, a big part of it was all about Vince Russo versus Jim Cornette. A lot like this episode was, when it really should have been about the topic at hand, that being the Brawl for All, the Montreal Screwjob in the last season. It's all about Russo versus Cornette. So anyway, Vince Russo says that when he came into the company, the creative sucked. The creative direction, the creative vision that they had at that point was terrible. They had Duke the Dumpster Droese, fucking Mantor at that point, all these stupid-ass characters. It was just terrible. Cornette talks about how he hates the word fake and all this other stuff when people call it fake, because Vince Russo called it fake. He said it was fake fighting. He wanted to make it more real. Vince Russo thinks he came into the company with a bigger, more of a fan perspective. He was trying to give the fans what they wanted to see. He understood what the fans wanted. They talked about how Vince had no hobbies, like you would probably never see in 2020 Vince going to like a movie theater or to go get groceries or whatever. He was all about wrestling. So Vince got involved with the creative side of the company after Vince McMahon that is, he liked what and when I said Vince has no hobbies, I meant Vince McMahon, not Russo, although that's probably true for Russo as well. Russo got involved in the creative side of the company after McMahon admitted that he liked what he was doing with the magazine. He gathered everyone, including Russo and Cornette, everyone who worked in the company at that point, Pat Patterson. He said to everybody, listen, what I'm seeing in this magazine is what we should be doing on a regular basis with our show. And Vince Russo was the head of the magazine at that point, so they then promoted him from the magazine side of things to the creative side of things. He wanted to make Raw more of a Jerry Springer-like show, which is why a lot of the stuff they did in the Attitude Era was inspired by Vince Russo, because that's the type of stuff that he loved, the drama and like the Maury Povich show, stuff like that. They loved those type of storylines. And he brings up how like college kids used to watch it, people in fraternities used to watch wrestling. That was what made it cool. He thinks he was the reason why wrestling was cool, which may be true to a certain extent, not entirely. He may be patting himself on the back too much, but it is what it is. Nothing surprising if you know what Vince Russo was all about. Vince Russo even admits he did not like JBL. He did not like Bradshaw. He thought he was way too cocky, ran his mouth way too often. And JBL made a comment one time in like a locker room meeting or whatever, or with the boys in the back, about how he could legitimately beat up anyone that he wanted. He could beat up, he was a true fighter. He was the toughest out of anyone. So he wanted to pitch that idea to Vince to put that theory to the test. Was Bradshaw really the greatest? This whole idea came from Vince Russo wanting to prove a point to JBL. How dumb is that? How petty is that? So he pitched a Brawl for All to Vince, where they would find 16 competitors who have nothing to lose to just beat the crap out of each other. Like, they're basically boxing, but they're not boxing because they're not boxers. They're professional wrestlers, for a reason, mind you. Vince obviously ate it up. He loved the idea. They did it. Bart Gunn is all over this episode as well. He's interviewed for it, which is, it was necessary considering he won the whole thing. Spoiler alert. So he's interviewed. He talks about it. They talk to Godfather, who got to the semifinals, which I'll talk about momentarily. He was in the Nation of Domination. He really had nothing going on. He was a shoot fighter. He needed the change, and he thought the Brawl for All really was what he was looking for. Bruce Pritchard asked Bart Gunn to be a part of it, and Godfather. It was $10,000. You would win, or you would earn $10,000 just to compete in the thing. $250,000 if you won the whole thing. So obviously no one turned it down. Droz was a part of it, who was doing the whole puking gimmick at that point. He was all obviously all a part of Beyond the Mat. He was all on that thing with the whole puking thing. He's gonna puke, that old dumb gimmick. I had no idea he was a part of Brawl for All, but I guess he was. And he actually got a lot farther than they were expecting. Cornette, as they went further and further along with the idea, got more and more concerned about the well-being of the performers and how this thing would turn out. JR felt that there was zero precedent for it, which means it came completely out of nowhere, and they had nothing really to base it off of. And as a result, it resulted in chaos. No one really knew what was going on, not just the fans who were frustrated with this whole dumb concept, but also the commentators who had no idea how to call the entire thing. The pairings were chosen at random, quote-unquote, and the first name drawn was the first name in the bracket, and so on. Everyone was introduced. They ran down the list of names that were involved in the tournament, including Bradshaw, Droz, Bart Gunn, Steve Blackman was another one. A lot of different people who had like legitimate fighting backgrounds. So they run through the whole bracket, including Dr. Death Steve Williams. And he stood out amongst everyone else because he was like a collegiate athlete. He had this amazing background. He was a true, real fighter. He was the toughest guy in the business. He had a reputation for being the toughest in the business. And he was being groomed. The whole idea was, we'll make this tournament for him. Obviously, the whole reason they made the tournament was because of the comment that Russo made towards JBL, or wanted to prove him wrong, But not just that, but they were going to have Dr. Death win the whole thing and then groom him for a feud with Stone Cold Steve Austin. All right, makes sense in theory on paper. It premiered in June of 1998, I believe, on Raw. It consisted of 3 5-minute rounds. And the chaos of the fights, though, made it difficult. It made it difficult for everyone to follow. Like I said, the fans, the commentators, it was just a mess. It wasn't entertaining. It was just a mess because no one could properly follow this thing. They couldn't determine what a takedown was, or like what a punch was, or a knockout. It was just a complete mess. So Godfather's original opponent pulled out. I forgot who it was, but he pulled out because he didn't want to do it. He probably got cold feet at the last second. And it just got to a point where, because no one knew what the hell was going on, people just started to punch each other at random. That's how random this thing was. People were just punching each other like it was no tomorrow, because that's all they really knew, So in the first round, Bart Gunn and Bob Holly went at each other. They were a part of the first round, which was kind of fucked up because they were partners. And they told them, it was all random. I mean, bullshit. It was obviously done on purpose because they made for an interesting fight on paper. As a wrestling match, whatever. As a real fight, you're telling them to kind of go after each other. That's kind of messed up. He mentioned that after he beat Bob Holly, who's also a fairly tough guy, it was kind of quiet in the car afterward. They had to ride together. They had a show the next day. They had a team together. I think the next day had a show. So it was kind of awkward for a while after their first fight that Bart Gunn won. Carl Ouellet, or Ouellet, I forgot how you pronounce his name, faced off with a one eye, or let me see here. He had one eye. He had one eye coming into the tournament. He was in the first round against Dr. Death. So, again, Jim Ross is even like, this is completely stupid. Why would you put a one-eyed man in the tournament against the favorite, Dr. Death? As a wrestling match, again, whatever. But as a legitimate fight, that's just a no contest. Why would you even do that, So everyone kind of got the feeling, maybe not the fans per se, but definitely people in the back, people that were a part of this thing, they got the feeling it was definitely skewed towards Dr. Death Steve Williams to ensure that he won. And wrestlers were getting hurt, it was just a complete mess. People were getting hurt left and right because it was real, even more hurt than they would normally. So Bart Gunn talked about how he was in really, really good shape, and he got in good shape after he was constantly bullied as a kid. He worked out, beat the shit out of those kids that bullied him when he was a kid, so he was waiting for his next opponent. Finds out it was going to be Dr. Death Steve Williams. Now, it was not supposed to be Dr. Death Steve Williams in the first place. I forgot who it was supposed to be, but the company changed it from who it was originally to Dr. Death. And Bruce Pritchard was the one who informed him of the change. Now, Bruce Pritchard is not interviewed for this documentary, obviously because he's a part of WWE now, but they do include quotes from his podcast from a few years ago, so that's good enough. But he was the one who informed him of the change. And Bart asked, am I going to get heat when I beat Dr. Death? And Bruce kind of like dismissed him as a joke. He's like, there's no way you're going to be Dr. Death Steve Williams. And everyone kind of ribbed him about it backstage when he got to the show. Like, oh, good luck beating Dr. Death out there, blah, blah, blah. And he got pissed. He was fucking pissed. He was furious. So that really motivated. Because they laughed at him, that made him that much more furious. And that motivated him to go in there and beat the crap out of him. So Bart kind of surprised him when Dr. Death took him down at the beginning. Then he retaliated. He kind of used that as motivation to bounce back. Took him down. He took him down next, and then Dr. Death tore his hamstring on a move. He was completely out of it. He was a man on one leg. He couldn't defend himself. Dr. Death still continued. They didn't throw out the fight. He still continued on because, again, he's tough. So Bart knocks the shit out of him. He knocks him out, and he wins. Bart wins, and everyone was stunned. And Russo was getting, flack from Cornette, like, why would you change the bracket? Like, all this other stuff. Like, you just cost us millions of dollars with this thing. And Russo didn't really see the big deal because he didn't really see the appeal of Dr. Death and as someone they were going to build around. He was like, it's not that big of a deal, whatever. Like, we'll go with Bart Gunn or whatever. He didn't really see the big deal in Dr. Death getting, bumped from the tournament so early. So anyway, Dr. Death, they talked about how he was gone within a year. And I guess he came back to TV. I looked on his wiki after watching the show. He did make a few more appearances for the company in like 99, 2000. He was gone soon after that. He got hurt with the hamstring injury. I mean, that didn't end his career, but he lost all buzz. They lost all interest in pushing him, and that was it for Dr. Death. And unfortunately, he passed away in 2009, so he never really fulfilled his full potential in the company because of the way things went wrong with this tournament, the Brawl for All. So Russo, again, felt that he wasn't up and coming, so it wasn't a big deal that Dr. Death lost. And he had a ton of heat on him, that being Bart Gunn. The fact, and he even said before he knocked him out, am I going to have heat for knocking this guy out? And they laughed at the fact that he would even beat him, but he did, so he had a ton of heat. So Bart went on to face the Godfather. And I think JR even said, I don't know. Oh, no, I'll mention that later after what JR said to Bart Gunn. That wasn't here. That was a little later on in the episode. I'll get to that later. So Bart Gunn in the semifinals, I believe, went on to face the Godfather, while Droz faced Bradshaw. And Droz felt like he won. He felt that Bradshaw thought, he kind of felt like he won too. And Bradshaw was kind of the one they were building around because, Vince Russo wanted him to get the shit kicked out of him in the finals. So we can kind of tell Bradshaw won the thing, but it was pretty evident that Droz should have won. And Droz is the same guy that, broke his neck right after. They talk about that later, and it's really sad to see him in a wheelchair and all this other stuff, still paralyzed, but I'll talk about that soon enough. At the end of the episode, they kind of catch up with Droz. So, again, Russo admitted, he wanted to see Bradshaw get his ass kicked. Godfather, his whole fighting background came from beating up pimps at a bar, in like a club, really. Not a bar, more of a club. That's how he got so tough. He used to knock people out with one hand. He used to slap them in the face and he would knock them out. Now, that's how tough this motherfucker was, okay? So Bart Gunn, or rather Godfather, he was 2 wins away from claiming a $250,000 prize. So he got overconfident, he says. Bart said that he would knock him out beforehand. He's like, oh, I'm going to knock you out. They got really, Godfather was like, oh, I'm going to knock you out. Bart's like, no, I'm going to knock you out. And Godfather laughed. Sure enough, Bart Gunn won the entire thing. And everyone was at the monitor waiting to see what would happen, and Bart Gunn won because he couldn't feel his legs and he got knocked out. He got that shit kicked out of him. He got really, really hurt, and his wife was upset because she blamed the smoking that he was smoking that day, and he was like, listen, I smoke every day. It was the fact that it was overconfident that really cost me in the end. And again, he got really, really hurt. They showed pictures of his leg. It looked absolutely disgusting. And that was when he realized, listen, this is a really dumb concept. I love how he realizes only then that it was a dumb concept and not when the whole thing started. Because he was winning, so he didn't really have any reason to think that until it came time for him to lose. Then he's like, yeah, this was probably pretty dumb because I got really hurt from that fight, rather. So Cornette just goes off on Russo for making a tournament just to prove a point to Bradshaw. He goes off on Russo here, as you would only expect from Jim Cornette, which I thought was wildly entertaining. So Bart and Bradshaw had their fight. Bart punched him, and Bradshaw got back up because he's tough, whatever. Knocked him out again, and he just went completely down on his feet. And then officials were concerned for Bradshaw because he was like twitching, and he just was not right in the head. He was like, the lights were on, but no one was home. Like that whole expression, that's what it was kind of like for Bradshaw in that moment, where they were concerned about his well-being because Bart knocked his lights out. Literally. Not literally, but you know what I mean. So Russo admitted that he could not hold back his emotions. I don't know if he was laughing or if he was like happy about Bradshaw getting the shit kicked out of him. I don't know. But Cornette brings up that this guy still to this day does not understand why it was a dumb idea. And Russo even says later on, yeah, I would not do that today. So at least he says that. He doesn't say, I would do it all over again. But to this day, he does not regret doing the tournament. Cornette says. He does not understand how dumb it was and how damaging it was to the entire wrestling business, specifically WWE. And they talk about how Russo versus Cornette, that whole feud will never end, and how Cornette one time threatened to kill him with a baseball bat, all this other shit. So anyway, they kind of get through the whole Cornette-Russo feud, and if you've heard it before, you've heard it a million times. So Bart Gunn gets awarded Golden Gloves for winning the whole tournament. JR confronts him afterward, and he tells Bart, hey, we should have done our homework, we should have realized that you were tougher than we thought, blah, blah, blah. And JR told him there were no hard feelings. That was when Bart Gunn realized, listen, when he said no hard feelings, that was when he knew, all right, they're bullshitting me, there's a ton of heat on me, you know? And everyone admits that it was a dumb idea. Cornette said, listen, nothing against Bart, nice guy, good wrestler. There were no sales, though. I mean, he's not a guy that you really build around. I think they should have done something with the guy as opposed to sitting him at home. I think that's incredibly dumb. But I can see where they're coming from with this, where Cornette said there were no sales there. There was nothing to be gained from Bart Gunn winning this tournament. JR said that nobody got over. And then afterward, Bart just got sat at home with nothing to do. And he was getting pissed, like, why aren't you capitalizing off of this? He probably still got the $250,000. He didn't say that he didn't. I feel like he would have if he didn't. But he was pissed because he's like, why aren't you doing anything with me, you know? So that was when they introduced Butterbean. And this guy is huge now. Like, he was he was big when they first introduced him a while ago. But he's really big now in terms of, like, wildly obese. But, you know, it is what it is. So they show Butterbean, and he's like, that he heard that WWF was pissed after Dr. Death Williams got knocked out. And there were already talks at that point of bringing in Butterbean. It was a world-renowned boxer at that point to come in and kind of humble Bart Gunn. So Vince was the one, I think, McMahon, not Russo. He was the one who came up with the idea of Bart Gunn facing Butterbean and like a fight of the two legitimate boxers, whatever. Bart Gunn is not a boxer. He's a wrestler who got lucky, really. And he just so happened to be the best of all the wrestlers they had in the company at that point. And Bart agreed to doing the match at WrestleMania 15, I want to say. I think it was 15, not 14. He just wanted to do it. It was 15. It was in 99. He agreed to do it because he just wanted to be back on TV. He just wanted to be back on the road, so he's like, all right, I'll do it, whatever. Butterbean told Godfather and Gilbert, I misread my writing here, he told the two of them before the match or before the fight, like the day before when they were sitting around smoking and drinking, whatever, that he was going to knock Bart Gunn out in seconds. Because he's like, listen, you guys are tough, but you don't do what I do. I'm a boxer. I will knock that kid out in seconds at WrestleMania. So when Butterbean went out to the ring, I write Vince here, and I got to specify because it confuses me. McMahon was the one who smiled at Butterbean on his way to the ring because he realized that it was all over for Bart Gunn. When the bell rang, he realized it was a little different than being in the ring, across the ring from a fellow wrestler. He realized there was a different vibe there. Russo was, in the crowd or somewhere near the crowd. He could tell that something was off, that something was about to go wrong. And Bart even admits, I'm not a boxer. I'm a wrestler, that he's a wrestler, not a boxer. He trained to be a boxer leading into that fight. Didn't have enough time, though. That's the problem. Didn't have enough time to train. He probably still would have lost anyway, but he had zero time to train, and he was just completely out of his element here in the ring with Butterbean, all right? So Butterbean knocks him down. Bart gets back up, and Butterbean was hoping that he wouldn't get back up because he's like, if this kid gets back up, I'm going to knock the shit out of him. Sure enough, he gets back up. He knocks the crap out of him to the point where, like, his head turned around. He could have broken his neck. That's how hard he hit Bart Gunn. Completely unnecessary. And he kind of takes like pride in it now, talking about it all these years later, which is kind of gross, but whatever. He said that his kids called and asked him, "Oh, why did you kill a guy?" And he's like, "Oh, he's not dead. Don't worry. I just knocked him out." And Bart Gunn said that was it. That was it for his career in the United States. So Bart has not, maybe until now, maybe he did it for this show, but at least after that, he never watched that Butterbean fight back because he felt like he made mistakes and he didn't want to relive those mistakes by rewatching that match. He saw Butterbean do MMA over in Japan, so he tried MMA because he wanted that rematch. He beat the same guy that Butterbean beat in 2 rounds. Butterbean beat this guy in 2 rounds, something like Cabbage Patch or whatever, I don't know. Butterbean beat him in 2 rounds. What's his name? Bart Gunn beat him in 1 round. So he's like, if I can beat this guy in 1 round, Butterbean, it took him 2, I think I can beat him. So he wanted that fight. He wanted that Butterbean fight. They were going to give it to him, but his only thing was, I need 12 weeks to train. They didn't give it to him. They were like, that's ridiculous. We're not going to give you 12 weeks. We need to do this fight now or something like that. So I guess the fight fell apart. The fight never happened. And then after that, he was done with the whole fighting thing. He did the 2 fights, and then he was done. And he admits that he misses performing now. We catch up with Droz, who talks about how he broke his neck in a powerbomb spot with D'Lo Brown in an episode of SmackDown right after this, I think in 98, 99. And Brown started crying. You could tell that D'Lo Brown felt really, really bad after that. And they don't blame each other, and it just, shit happens. Droz says, and, he's really, wildly obese now, sits in a wheelchair. It sucks, but he still hunts, he said, and he's still paralyzed, unfortunately, still in a wheelchair. I think he's gotten better with that. Like, I think he was supposed to be paralyzed from the neck down. Now he can feel like his finger, like he can move his arms around, but he can't walk, obviously. And Russo, we hear from him as well. He goes, he feels bad now knowing about the concussions that are caused from shots to the head, so he feels bad about it. He would not propose it today. Well, no shit he wouldn't propose it today. We hear from Jim Ross, who calls it a cluster, and it did not create new stars as they expected it to, which was a complete failure. And Bart Gunn says that they should learn from their mistakes and let it disappear, which they have. I mean, it's been 20 years. WWE, of course, has never repeated that tournament again, which they shouldn't because it was a dumb idea. We have Vince Russo to blame, and McMahon went along with it. I mean, he went along with it. It's his company. He's to blame too. But Vince Russo, it was all his idea. So if it wasn't for Vince Russo, they would have never done shit like that in the first place. So thankfully, Bart Gunn is right. They should learn from their mistakes, never do it again, let it disappear, which it has. They've never really talked about it since. And that was it for this episode of Dark Side of the Ring on the Brawl for All. Very interesting stuff. A lot of things you probably already knew. I wasn't all that familiar. I mean, I know about the Brawl for All, but I didn't know about the ins and outs. I'd never seen the whole thing. I didn't know about the backstage stuff. So I found this episode very fascinating. If this is supposed to be the quote-unquote weakest of this season of Dark Side of the Ring, then I'm very interested to see what they do next with the Jimmy Snuka episode, which is the next one, and all the other episodes they have coming up on this season of Dark Side of the Ring. So stay tuned with me here on the channel for more reviews of Dark Side of the Ring. I'm a bit backed up, but they should be caught up eventually. I am watching them as they air. These reviews are just going up a lot later than expected, just because I have a lot of content I want to put up on the channel first. But be sure to like the video, drop a comment, share the video, and subscribe to the channel to be notified every time. Or you gotta hit the notifications button, that little ring bell thing. Gotta ring the bell, like you would a wrestling match, like you would a boxing match in the Brawl for All. But if you do, you get notified every time a video is uploaded. You'll find out the next time I upload a Dark Side of the Ring review right here on Network and Chill. So until next time, guys, have a great one. I'm Graham G. Matthews, and I'll catch your ass down the road.